Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Happy Thursday if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out. I've been having an awesome week. I've been having a crazy busy week. I've got so many new projects and work-related things coming up in my life at the moment. So I have just had a hectic time already, but I love being busy. It makes me so happy. And I'm sitting here currently looking out my window, and there is so much snow falling to the ground. And I know for some people that might seem kind of gross and, not like a happy moment. But for me, who absolutely loves winters, even in Canada when it's minus 30 degrees Celsius, I am super duper happy about it. So yes, I know it's a little weird, but I love looking out my window right now and seeing the light, fluffy white snow fall into my backyard. It just brings an extra smile to my face. So I'm feeling good today. I've been feeling productive and busy, and that's always when I'm the happiest. And then adding snowfall to it, such a good time. I know some people are probably listening to this and like, what? You're crazy. A little bit, but whatever makes you happy, right? So I'm back with another episode to fulfill your day with all positive, feel-good news. You can throw away those negative news headlines and just sit down and focus on the good for the next 30 minutes here at least. I got so many good stories today. I say that every episode, but I got so many new discoveries that are really awesome. I also have some pretty cool heart-wrenching stories as well that will definitely tug at your heartstrings, which I absolutely love. But I love the new discoveries because I think it's so cool how, like, in a world of so much chaos right now, our lives are so chaotic, with the pandemic and everything that's been going on. I love all these new discoveries that are coming out that are going to be making our world a better place, in the future. So I love being able to share those things with you guys, give you a little bit of sense of hope that, there's still people working towards, making big health decisions and big health goals being achieved, and just new discoveries happening everywhere that are doing good for people in our world. So love being able to share those with you guys. So let me jump right into it. The first one I want to share with you is a pretty significant one that I think we can all be happy about. You know how I love to at least throw one positive thing about the pandemic into the episode, or at least I try. And this is a pretty positive thing that I just had to start today's episode off with. So Watershed is a coronavirus vaccine, and it looks to be 90% effective in phase 3 trial of about 43,000 people. Okay, so this is a report from Pfizer. So early results were now released. They were now announced for the clinical trials that involved 43,538 volunteers that showed a robust 90% success rate for protecting people against coronavirus. So as part of the phase 3 trials that were launched in July, this is by the developers Pfizer and BioNTech. The participants from diverse backgrounds background. So in 6 different countries, which are the US, Germany, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, and Turkey, they received 2 injections spaced 21 days apart. So the analysis compared the number of cases of COVID-19 among volunteers receiving the vaccine with an approximately equal size groups of volunteers who got a placebo jab instead. So the researchers reported no contraction of the disease in over 90% of the vaccinated group, with the immune protection achieved 28 days after the first dose of the 2-dose schedule. So the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, set a minimum effectiveness bar for COVID-19 vaccines at 50% for drugs seeking approval. This is the first COVID-19 candidate vaccine to produce data exceeding that mark. So what is next for this? So they say that the data presented is only an early look into how the new vaccine seems to be performing. Further safety and efficiency data is going to be continued to be collected. So it's relying on an independent data monitoring committee to analyze the results. So Pfizer and BioNTech say that they are continuing to accumulate safety data and estimate that a median of 2 months of such data following the final dose, and the amount of safety data specified by the FDA in its guidance for potential emergency use authorization, and will be available by the 3rd week of November. So based on their current projections, Pfizer would be ready to manufacture globally up to 50 million vaccine doses at the end, by the end of the year. So that's up to about 1.3 billion doses in 2021. So Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the USA's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, he described the trial results as extraordinary. And in an interview with the Washington Post, he also said that given the U.S. firm Moderna uses similar technology in its candidate vaccine, it gives you hope we might even have 2 vaccines. So there you go, a very positive note about the pandemic that I thought I could start today's episode off with. Now a little story that's going to tug at your heartstrings. So this is pretty cool. So before the invention of text messaging, of course, which of course makes it super easy to send a note to a friend or a family member, right? Before there were telephones in every single home, that would connect you instantly, with that loved one. Before all of that, there were letters. And sure, you might need to wait a few days or a few weeks for that postman to deliver the letter, but the special feeling it contained made it very worthwhile, right? So there is now this man who is sitting with a typewriter on an NYC sidewalk to help strangers send letters to friends who are feeling blue. How cool is that? So, although, a letter offers no instant gratification, handwritten correspondence were always highly anticipated and savored, right? So, their stationery, envelope, and stamped were saved as mementos to be read and reread and to be treasured. So, in the face of worry over the coronavirus pandemic and all the stress that it's placed on New Yorkers, this Brooklyn-based performance artist and English professor, his name is Brandon Wolfe. He then came up with the idea of reviving the letter writing tradition as a means to reach out and comfort one another. So knowing that people have lost loved ones, jobs, businesses, and given up simple pleasures like hugging a friend, he began to ponder how to help people make meaningful connections. And his answer, was to take a page from history. And he says, when interpersonal connection is risky, what are other ways where we can be together? So he says, what is a better experience than getting a piece of mail in your mailbox from somebody you didn't expect to hear from? So using a vintage portable typewriter, and he's seated on a folding chair alongside a mailbox, his sign says, free letters for friends feeling blue. And after just a few days, there was so much response. Like, he spent several hours, a few days, a week, for 4 weeks, and he was just typing letters for, his neighbors around the area. He's 37 years old, and they said that this is just dubbed as a post-dramatic street performance, which is so cool. So he says, let's not mourn our mailbox as vessels of civic vitality, but make renewed use of them to sit together at a distance and console one another and those we love, posting letters from the edge, albeit the mailbox all month, with paper and stamps and hand sanitizer, ready to serve as your medium, your console. Together, if you like, we can take a moment to type a note of consolation, a blue-edged missive to a friend you think could use it. How cool is that? First of all, I love writing letters. I think it's still to this day, if I could send, a letter rather than a text message, I will, if I can wait that long for it to get to that person. I think letters are so personal because she just handwritten letters. I think they're so special and they give that special connection. So such a cool way to keep people connected in a time when, we're all supposed to be so spread apart, right? 6 feet or more, of course, right? We're all hiding away in our houses and not being able to console those friends who might be feeling blue. And there's a lot more people feeling blue these days because of everything going on. So it's so cool to be connected in such a unique way. So if you're in that area, if you're in Brooklyn and you want to go find this guy, I highly suggest it. I would love to see, pictures and, the letters that he's written and kind of hear all about that. I think it's such a cool concept. All right, well, now it's time for a little bit of a break, but don't go anywhere. I already gave you a, new discovery. I gave you a heart-wrenching story, and I'm going to jump into some more kind of awesome discoveries and big decisions that people all over our world are making and how it's going to make such a big difference to later to come in the lives, as well as I got more new discoveries. I got more heart-wrenching stories. I got a good episode for you, so don't you dare go anywhere. I will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Jo. I've got so many feel-good stories to share with you, so let me just jump right back into it. My next story I want to share with you is actually about Austin, Texas, and they voted yes on a $7 billion transportation revolution. How cool is that? Okay, so the Texas state capital of Austin is getting ready for a public transit revolution. It is a $7 billion plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and traffic congestions by providing a variety of different transportation options and infrastructure to the citizens of one of the most fastest growing cities in the country. So along with a new rail system, it's featuring 31 new stops. There will also be 4 high-speed bus routes, neighborhood shuttle services that will take people to and from the stations, and new park and ride areas to encourage city motorists to use the new infrastructure. They say there were 3 main arguments that were made. One was congestion, one was climate change, and one was mobility equity in our city. So Proposition A, as it was voted on during the 2020 U.S. elections, also includes a $450 million plan for adding cycling and walking infrastructure, such as pedestrian bridges, bike lanes, sidewalks, urban parks, all of which will be put together under the moniker of Project Connect, that will feature experts in community planning, construction, and engineering, as well as advisors from the CAP Metro Board. So together they will assemble on January 1st to work out the details of the program. The new train stops will service North and South Austin, the airport, downtown, and Colony Park. There is a full map. If you are in that area, you can search up the Capital Metro website and you can see a full map of all of that. So they say it's going to be a very liberating experience to access more of the city than you could before. Austin is a very car-oriented and car-dependent city. More and more people and more leaders are realizing that we actually need transportation options. So they say around 50% of motorists drive alone in Austin, which is a figure which the city government would like to see reduced, and funding is to be raised by a new property tax and by federal carbon reduction funding programs, which will cover around 45% of construction costs, according to this multiple report. So if you are curious a little bit more about what's going to be happening in Austin, Texas, you can head over to the Austin Chronicle, and there's so much more information, as well as links to all those maps and anything else that you're curious about. So there you go, a positive step towards, making things more efficient, as well as reducing those greenhouse gas emissions. So such an awesome thing. My next story for you is also about climate change, and you can now look for these new badges on menus that help consumers act on climate change. So Panera Bread has announced that it will update its menus with a series of climate-friendly designations designed by the World Resource Institute, so the WRI, that helps inform consumers about how their food choices affect global climate change. So the Cool Food Meal sticker will appear next to some favorites on the Panera Bread's menu. So you might recognize some of these, like the Chipotle Chicken Avocado Melt, the Fuji Apple Chicken Salad, the Broccoli Cheddar Soup, just to signify the carbon dioxide used to create the ingredients, including from the land use, the energy used in transportation, and in the supply chain. So it's low enough to be in line with research published by the WRI that aligns agriculture and food-related emissions with the reduction in CO2 emissions needed to meet the 2030 Paris Agreement on climate change. So just like recommended calories per day, WRI has established a maximum recommended daily carbon footprint for a person's diet, which is actually 38% smaller than the current average. So for breakfast in the United States, it amounts to 3.59 kg of CO2e per portion, and for lunch or dinner, it is 5.38 kg CO2e per portion. So people are becoming more aware of the climate change and its effects, but many still don't know what they can do about it. So Cool Food Meals helps people understand that taking action is as simple as what we eat. So a busy parent or a college student or absolutely anyone can now go into Panera and by choosing a cool food meal, they are part of a growing group of people who are building a climate-friendly lifestyle. So they are saying, according to this survey of 1,000 Americans aged 18 to 80 years old, that many more consumers are looking for more climate-oriented eating strategies than in years in the past, but taste and healthiness are far stronger deciding factors at this point. 59% of those who were surveyed said it was important to them that their food be produced in a sustainable manner, though things like carbon emissions, land use, and water use were not found to be very important. Overwhelmingly, though, it was pesticide use and affordability that was really kind of a deciding factor. Most of them ate protein more than any other category, so 38%, and 58% of participants said they tried to stay away from carbohydrates and sugar. So not exactly the picture of Panera Bread's menu by any stretch of the imagination, but the WRA hopes more franchises will join in adding their cool food stickers to the menus, and they've had some great success already with it. So through WRI's Cool Food Initiative, various cities and universities have signed on to Cool Food's pledge to try and transform civic food service bodies into ones that reduce the amount of CO2 in the supply chain. So according to this press release that was from WRI, the preliminary data for 2019 show that Cool Food Pledge members have already reduced their food-related emissions by 3% collectively, which is beyond the course to reach the reduction targets in line with the Paris Agreement. So it's not just going to be at Panera's Bread that you see these stickers. Soon enough, a lot more franchises will be using these stickers on their menus to help you kind of decide on what you want to eat and, what's the most important to you. But I thought that was a pretty cool concept. All right, so my next story for you is about Nebraska. On election day, voters in Nebraska voted to put significant limits on the interest rates payday lenders can charge. So a 400% interest rate on a small dollar loans is the average across the United States. Now that 83% of Nebraska's voters have approved the initiative 428, that won't be the case in this Midwestern state. So payday lending interest rates will soon be capped at 36%. So Nebraska, in addition to DC, is the 17th state to implement such a cap. Other states too have pushed such a measure in recent years. So that includes Colorado, Ohio, Montana, and South Dakota. And according to the Nebraskans for Responsible Lending Coalition, which helped put the initiative on the ballot, the average interest rate for a payday loan in Nebraska has been 404%. So in South Dakota, before 2016, payday lenders charged up to 574% interest, which is just absolutely crazy. According to the Brookings, the volume of payday alternative loans offered by credit unions grew considerably when the state voted to cap interest rates at 36% in the last U.S. election. So the Center for Responsible Lending, the CRL, a consumer advocacy group that supports expanded regulation of the industry, they said that there is just something wrong with the triple-digit interest rates and trapping people in cycles of debt. So federal advocacy director at the CRL, her name is Ashley Harrington, and she stated that this transcends political ideology. Everyone should be able to get behind safe, affordable consumer loans that don't have triple-digit interest rates. I couldn't agree more. So there you have it, another positive story. All right, it's time for another break, but don't go anywhere. I'm going to round off today's episode with some more feel-good stories for you, including a story about the massive progress about educating girls around the world. You know, what has happened in the last 25 years. It's pretty incredible. I also have a pretty cool story about a common weed that stops the growth of breast cancer cells. This is all kind of came up in a new study, so I can't wait to share that with you as well. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the last stretch of today's episode of America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Let's finish off today's episode with some awesome stories to round it off and send you off on your day, leaving a positive and optimistic, feel-good note. So let's jump right back into it. The next story I want to share with you is the massive progress that has happened over the past 25 years when it comes to educating girls around the world. So over the last 25 years, the proportion of girls being educated around the world has risen to 89%, which is a 16% increase since 1995. A UNESCO report that was just released last month shows that 180 million more girls have enrolled in primary and secondary education compared to a generation ago. So additionally, 3 times more women are now enrolled in universities. Isn't that awesome? So the Global Education Monetary Report entailed a new generation, 25 years of efforts for gender equality in education, evaluated the progress in girls' education over the last 2.5 decades since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which is a landmark commitment by 189 countries to advance the rights of girls and women. They say, we all know that education is the cornerstone of equality, and the education of girls and women is the first step towards a more gender equal world. So since 1995, the global enrollment rate for girls increased from 73% to 89%, with the biggest improvements seen in sub-Africa, Southern Asia, and especially India. How awesome is that? Significant progress has been made in primary schools in 23 countries, where gender parity has been achieved compared to 1995, when fewer than 80 girls for every 100 boys attended schools. So 3 times more women are also now enrolled in universities than 2 decades ago, with particular progress seen in Northern Africa and Western Asia. In Morocco, parity was achieved in 2018 compared to just 3 women enrolled for every 10 men in the early 1990s. 16%, that is quite the increase. I can't wait to see it continue to grow. Now, I mentioned before the break a story about a common weed that stops the growth of breast cancer cells. So, a plant which had previously been dismissed as not being medically useful could prove to be a hero in disguise. So after scientists have now discovered that it stops the growth of breast cancer cells. So this groundbreaking research could lead to the future chemotherapy cancer advances, also known as the thale crest. So the leaves were treated with the plant hormone jasmonate, which is a substance discovered in jasmine that boosts plant responses to stress. So then they incubated the treated leaves with breast cancer cells. So the researchers found that not only did the cancer cells stop growing, but the normal cells remained unaffected. So this is significant, as use of the plant in breast cancer treatment could potentially lead to a quicker recovery time and fewer secondary effects for patients that are subjected to chemical treatment. They have also discovered molecular mechanisms associated with the changes in the breast cancer cells that will allow development of further new treatments. So Professor Alejandra Devoto from the Department of Biological Sciences at Royal Holloway University, she's been conducting this research since 2006, and she just published a paper on the findings in the new journal New Cytocologist, along with Dr. Amanda Harvey from Brunel University, London, and Prof. Nicholas Smirnov at the University of Exeter. She says, I am truly excited to have discovered the amazing impact this unassuming plant has on breast cancer cells. It just proves that even plants with a non-medicinal pedigree can work for cancer treatment. This plant is very much like the Cinderella of the medicinal plant world. No one thought it was so special, but it has shown its true colors via our research, and the discovery has important implications in developing treatments for cancer as well as other diseases. So Dr. Harvey and Professor Smirnov, they added, combined with recent progress in metabolic engineering and biotechnology, our approach will also facilitate production and analysis of bioactivities of valuable metabolates from plants on an industrial scale. And they say, we are looking forward to continuing our collaboration with Prof. Devoto to identify the plant-derived chemicals that interfere with breast cancer cells as well as with other diseases, and to progress this research by gathering more funding to benefit society more widely. Isn't that cool? I love finding new discoveries that they once thought was just completely dismissed, and then they're like, hey, just kidding, this could actually save lives. Isn't that cool? All right, so I got one more story here for you, and it's about a tech startup that can now brew up carbon-negative rocket fuel by capturing CO2 emissions from the air. So as more and more tech companies and research organizations turn their sights towards space exploration, this Brooklyn-based startup company has discovered a way to explore the solar system without polluting the Earth. So the Air Company brand first gained notoriety back in November of 2019 when it launched the world's first carbon negative vodka made of air, water, and solar energy. And then when the pandemic hit, they quickly pivoted their production facility into creating hand sanitizer. And now they're applying their groundbreaking carbon conversion technology to help make the space industry more eco-friendly by turning CO2 into rocket fuel. So they say that we discovered that we can make fuel very efficiently as somewhat of an accident. It says we were running our systems at higher temperatures than normal under some conditions that we don't typically do, and found out that we could very efficiently make these fuel molecules. So that was electrochemist and Air Company co-founder Stafford Sheehan. He says, until now, rocket engines have used liquid methane made from natural gas as an unsustainable, non-reusable fossil fuel product. However, organizations like SpaceX and Blue Origin have begun to look for new propellants so they can power their rocket engines for commercial spaceflight and Mars exploration. And that's where Air Company comes in. So for every launch, if Air Company's CO2-based rocket fuel formula was used for every launch, they would mitigate 750 tons of CO2 from being emitted into the atmosphere. So that's equivalent about of a dozen flights between New York to Los Angeles on a 747 plane. Pretty cool, right? So the carbon negative fuel could also be used to mitigate the ecological effects of other forms of transportation, although the group is primarily focused on rocket fuel. Air Company says that their formula could be used to fuel return flights from Mars since the planet's atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide, and the vision of humans inhabiting Mars is moving closer to becoming a reality, and it is imagined that CO2 can help us reach that goal. So they say we've proven the viability of our breakthrough technology and are impelled to defy the impossible by igniting innovation across every industry vertical we touch. There you have it. Another positive feel-good story to finish off today's episode. I feel like today's episode was filled with so many new discoveries, so many exciting things, and it just reminds me that, our world is still turning, things are still happening, great things are still happening amidst all of this chaos that we've all been going through in 2020. But wow, we are almost halfway through November now, which is just absolutely crazy, and good things are still happening, good things will still continue to happen. So I'm so happy that I get to be here with you guys twice a week to share such awesome positive stories to hopefully uplift your day, give you some hope in humanity, in our world, that things are still working, great things are still happening, new discoveries are still, being discovered, amazing things. So it is so cool to be able to sit here and share these with you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Do not forget to head over to our social media pages. I do update those regularly, so make sure you click the like and follow button on those. Also, do not forget to click the subscribe button. Then you will be notified when I do have these episodes out, which is every single Monday and Thursday. And then, as always, please do not forget to leave a 5-star review. The review actually helps out so much. It makes my day, gives me another reason to smile, and just uplifts my spirits. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stay happy, stay positive, and as always, spread kindness every single chance that you get. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.